figured I would shoot a quick video real quick on Vacuum Best Practice. Very minimal setup for a residential system, 5 tons and under. You don't need anything extravagant. The pump is going to be your biggest investment, which most of you guys already have. So I'm going to go over kind of the startup and the setup and how you do everything. My equipment's going to look different than yours, but bottom line is it all pretty much works the same. So I'm going to switch the camera around and go over the setup and kind of the step-by-step process of how you want to do your vacuums to be the most efficient. Okay? So I have the vacuum pump, of course, and what I'm doing right now before I even connect anything else is I have my vacuum gauge connected directly to my vacuum pump, and I have a vacuum pump running. What this does is it tests the pull down of my pump. Okay? A pump should be able to pull down to below 30 microns with nothing else attached to it, or you need to troubleshoot your pump, change your oil, do something like that. Now I just changed this oil the day before yesterday, and it's not had any vacuum on it besides the test of my equipment, so it's good to go. And my vacuum pump's been running for a couple of minutes now, and you can see I'm at 25 microns. So I did pull below 30 microns. Now, one thing, when you turn your pump off, because there's not a lot of volume in this tube, your vacuum is going to rise significantly very quickly. It's important to note that that does not mean that you have a leak. It's just there's so little volume that it's going to rise very quickly. Everything leaks to a point. Gas gets off gas. Different things happen. So when I turn this off, you can see that it's going to start rising a lot, and that's normal. Does not mean your pump's bad. Does not mean your micron gauge is leaking. It's just the low volume of that fitting. So now I am using a 1/2 inch connection with a 3/4 inch hose connected to one side of the system, but like I said, your vacuum setup is going to be different. The most important thing that you should always have is a valve core tool. One, if not two, for anything 5 tons and less. If you're using a large diameter hose, 1/2 inch or 3/4, one is plenty. You're going to pull this down in less than 5 minutes with only one. New line sets pull down faster. If you flush the line set, which you should do at every job, then it's still going to pull down fairly quickly because you've got all the old oil and stuff out of there. So I've taken the valve core out while I still had the pressure of the nitrogen on it. So we pressurized the line set to 150 psi, and after we did that, we let it stand for at least 10 minutes. This one probably stood for 30. Either way, so there was nitrogen on it. I did pull get that in focus, I did pull the valve core out with my core tool, and I set that aside. Then I bled the nitrogen off. A little bit more in there. I'm going to go ahead and bleed it off. And you want to bleed it off just until it quits making a noise. You don't want to allow any more atmosphere or moisture in there. So now that I don't have any more pressure on it, I'm going to connect my vacuum gauge to, my vacuum hose to my vacuum pump. Want to say hi, Sam?
Hi.
Doing a video on vacuum. So it doesn't really matter what your setup, just connect your hoses to your pump. Finger tight. You don't want to use channel locks or wrenches. You'll ruin the gaskets and have to replace them more often. And then you can either put your vacuum gauge on your core tool, or if you're only using one core tool, I like to put it on the far side of the system, on the liquid line. So, and do not remove the core out of the liquid line if you're going to connect your vacuum gauge to it, because you won't be able to seal it off. So this is kind of the setup that I use. Got the micron gauge on the liquid line, got one core tool with the core removed on the suction line. I put a brass cap on this just so that the valve core doesn't leak, and then I have my hose going over to the vacuum pump, and we're ready to get started. So normally I do some type of Bluetooth graph to show the vacuum, but since I'm recording a video I can't do that, so we're just going to watch the gauge, and when I'm done I'm just going to take a picture of my gauge showing that we pull the vacuum down to below 500 microns, and then once we do the decay test for 10 minutes to make sure that it doesn't rise, I'll take a picture of that as well, and then we'll send that back to the office for verification that we had a proper vacuum. Alright, so we're going to turn the pump on, and we're going to slowly open the core tool. And now my vacuum pump has a gas ballast, and some of yours might too. But what the gas ballast is it just bypasses some of the oil, make sure oil lasts longer. So you're going to want to close that at about 1500 microns if you have one. But we're just watching right here. My gauge starts reading at 20,000 microns, I believe. So get into focus there. There we go, 25,000. So you can see that it's going down fairly quickly. I'm trying to get it in focus here. There we go. So we're at 5,000 already. It's been about 20 seconds. Coming down on 3,500. And also with the setup that I have with my vacuum gauge on the liquid line, and I'm pulling from the suction, the flow of moisture leaving the system is going all the way through into the indoor coil, and then it's going back out the liquid line and to this gauge. So while we're at 1800 microns on the far side of the system, I'm going to just real quick close my gas ballast since we're approaching 1500 microns. But back to what I was saying, since we're at 1400 microns on the far side of the system, the vacuum is much greater at the suction. So what's going to happen in a minute, whenever we get below 100, is that when I shut my vacuum gauge or my vacuum pump off and I close my core tool, my vacuum gauge is actually still going to continue to drop slightly even with the pump off. And the reason for that is because the system is equalizing, and then the vacuum is going to stabilize. And it will probably rise a little bit during the decay period, but with a tight system, you know, we won't go over 1,000 microns in 10 minutes. So it's been right at a minute and 30 seconds, I'd say, and we're already below 1,000. And this is just with one hose. This is not a new line set. We did a flush. About probably about 5 minutes now, and we're already below 500. I typically let mine go down a little bit further, maybe 450 or so, especially if it's cruising along, you know, 1 micron a second or better. When we isolate this with the core tool and turn the pump off, if the vacuum rises, you know, like I said, it's going to go down first if you're in this configuration, but if it does rise, and it seems to be rising quite a bit and fairly fast, a couple things that you can do. One, you can let it rise to see if it stops rising at some point. If it stops and goes down to, you know, 1 micron every second or something, and it doesn't just continue to rise, then more than likely you just still have moisture in the system, and it's not actually leaking. But if it continues to rise and it rises all the way back to atmospheric pressure, or to where your micron gauge fails to read, then you have a leak. So just while I've been talking here, we're already down to 350. So I'm going to go ahead and the first thing I'm going to do is shut my core tool off, and then I'm going to turn my vacuum pump off. So I'm going to isolate my core tool, turn the pump off, and now you can see that we're still dropping in vacuum. So once we try and get that back in focus, there we go. So now we're still dropping, so I'm going to run a decay test. This particular vacuum gauge simulates a 10-minute decay period based on the leak rate. So here in a minute, once it stops dropping, when I set my decay test, it's going to tell me if I passed fairly quickly because of the leak rate. You don't actually have to wait the full 10 minutes if you have a decent vacuum gauge. So it looks like we're tapering off at 315 microns. So I'm going to go ahead and start my decay. And my leak rate is 8 microns per minute, which means that if I wait 10 minutes, I will probably only lose 80 microns, which would put me not even above 400. So this is going to pass. And now what we're going to do is, leaving this isolated, we're going to get a core tool and we're going to crack open the suction service valve just enough to pressurize the line set above a vacuum, and then we're going to isolate it again, and we're going to remove our micron gauge, and we're going to remove our core tool, put our core back in, not in that order, but then once we get the system back with the cores in and everything, we're going to open both valves, and then we'll proceed with charging.